What's up, Go Givers family? This is Jawan Buford. And look, if you've ever set goals that you really believe genuinely mattered, right? You're looking to make a difference in your life. You've drawn a line in the sand and you said, look, from this point forward, things are going to be different. And then you looked up 60 days later and you're feeling like life somehow ate your plan. This video is for you. I recently did a workshop for the Incabizo co-working organization out in Ferndale and the MHHP. And what I shared with them was a framework that I've used periodically throughout my entrepreneurial journey that I would say is certainly not an exaggeration to share with you that it saved my life on multiple occasions. And once again, if you're that person that you feel like, look, I've tried goal setting, I've failed at it multiple times, I want you to take copious notes here. Now, look, this isn't going to be the same information. It's not going to be nearly as comprehensive as what I shared a couple of weeks ago. But what I will tell you, once again, it has been highly effective for me and other individuals, right? I've utilized this numerous times. I had a situation not too long ago where I was coming out of divorce, was on my knuckles, not a dime to my name, residence live in, just barely, just pretty much closing my back. And I utilized this framework to help me fast forward to today where my businesses are thriving, family life is fantastic, and I'm truly living a life of satisfaction, right? And so for the individuals who weren't able to make the workshop, who asked for a follow-up or a recap, this is for you as well. And hopefully it lands well. It helps you achieve your goals and move the ball forward. So here's the thing. This is what I firmly believe, that most entrepreneurs who fail at goal setting, it's not because they're unable to oftentimes articulate their goals, though that can be a challenge too, that more times than not, goal setting and goal execution boils down to not having infrastructure, right? Not having systems in place to help you achieve the vision you have for yourself and the things that you're taking aim at. So I'm recapping this workshop. And once again, it's a brief recap for those who didn't attend or for those who said, you know what, just give me what you got, right? And no doubt there will be a deep dive. They'll be introduced again live and via webcast, but let's get into it. So here's the thing. The core problem, once again, I believe is infrastructure, right? When I walked into the room, most of the entrepreneurs there had ambitious goals, or at least an ambitious vision or ideal of what they wanted to achieve. But when I asked them, do you have an operating system to execute on these goals, the room fell silent. And this is what typically happens, right? People set goals, they turn into vague aspirations, right? They're not concrete. There's no urgency, there's no daily impetus, right? The goals aren't strong enough, aren't big enough, aren't authentic enough. It's not them, right? To actually engage them like almost like a gravitational pull to get them to do the work over the long term. Progress becomes invisible and unmeasured, right? So if you're in a situation where you have these goals and you can't track success stories, snowflakes turn into snowballs. Well, the opposite happens too, right? You start to lose energy, you start to lose focus because you feel like you're not winning. And then people eventually check out, right? Not because they're incapable, but because they're trying to run on a vision and basically on willpower alone. That just doesn't work. Willpower is not an operating system, and discipline works for a period of time, but eventually you have to basically refuel yourself, right? You have to have tools in place to remind yourself. You have to have things in place to create accountability when the willpower and the excitement of the moment, when you set the goals, begins to fade. So what's the solution? The first thing is this, is making sure that you have a vision that is aligned, right? With the things that matter most to you, right? You got to have clear priorities. You can do everything, but you just can't do everything, right? You have to make sure, once again, you have accountability mechanisms in place so you don't forget yourself. And that is things that you can put in place to remind yourself that you curate, but also the people around you. And then you have to have a process, right? for reviewing the adjustments and making sure you have the proper cadence, right? To stay on course. In plain terms, you need a goal achieving execution operating system. Got to find a shorter way to say this, right? But you need something that really connects long term with the direction that you're headed and that compels you to stay focused on the daily actions and be structured and be accountable. So there's a couple questions that I share with the individuals who are in the room. And one of the questions I shared was simply this. A lot of people well, let me preface it. One of the things I said to preface the question I'm going to pose to you right now is I asked them, look, what are the things that give you energy? Because what I found is that a lot of people don't achieve their goals because they're building a vision that they think is palatable, that's acceptable, that other people will like, that will make them look good in front of their peers or their family or their loved ones or people on social media, whatever the case may be, right? They're looking for acceptance. And the bottom line is it is hard to invest your life energies behind a compromise, right? One of the things I challenge individuals to do is write down what really matters most to them. Be unapologetic. If money is your deal, you like watches, you like cars, you like boats, you like jewelry, fine. If helping people is your deal, fine. If you're one of those individuals that crave knowledge and know-how, right? You want to be a connector and respected, fine, fantastic. If you're one of those individuals that just simply thrives on having fun, fantastic. But your motives have to be your motives. The bottom line is trying to appease people. Look, everyone's already taken. You might as well be yourself, right? And I find that's one of the biggest challenges individuals have. So one of the questions I ask that I would encourage you listening to ask of yourself is 5 years from now, what will you wish you started today? Right? Are you building a vision? Here's the other question that serves you or once again impresses other people around you. Look, I'm going to be really transparent with you. One of my goals and one of the things that gives me energy is I love to prove people wrong. I grew up in an environment as a child where I didn't have people telling me what I could do. I didn't have individuals pouring into me. I didn't have individuals edifying me. I had my grandparents. That was it. Everyone else, it seemed like they were questioning everything I did because I always was a dreamer. I always was a creative, right? I had these big, hairy, audacious goals, BHAGs. And I remember everybody telling me how crazy I was for pursuing the things or being interested in things I was interested in. And so to that day, I do carry that with me. And I'm unapologetic about it. I have haters, I have detractors, I have naysayers, I have individuals who no doubt want to see me lose. It's part of what motivated me after my divorce. I'll get into that. And look, I'm not the type of person that spends time minding what's going on in other people's households and what their businesses, what's going on in their business. I could really care less. But look, I'll be really transparent. I love knowing that I'm walking across the stage or I'm showing up somewhere or I'm doing something and other people have to eat crow. That gives me a degree of satisfaction. I will only admit it. But what are the things that give you energy? What frustrates you so much? I mean, from the time you were a child, from the far back as you can remember, where when you observe a certain behavior, when you observe a certain thing, a certain phenomena, something happening that you have to get out your chair and do something and say something about it. What are those things? Be honest with yourself. Maybe you don't like to see people being bullied. Maybe that motivates you. Maybe you grew up in an environment like I did where you want to see good people win. Maybe that motivates you. You're tired of seeing good people come up short, right? It could be any number of things. But what are the things that give you energy, right? Or what are the activities that make you feel alive? Maybe giving a speech, maybe performing somehow and giving people joy, maybe drawing, maybe I don't know, playing basketball or some sport, whatever it may be. What are the things that you can recall from the time you were a child that just gives you energy? You enjoy doing those things, right? I want you to find your jam because the point here is clarity, right? A confused mind does nothing. You just simply don't need goals. You need non-negotiable principles. You need a framework to operate in. So when it's time to say no to things, you can say no to things because you're saying yes to something that's more compelling and more interesting to you and more in alignment with your passions and the things you want to accomplish, your beliefs about yourself. Something else that I ask individuals to do is simply give your year a title. Give 2026 a title, right? A theme that creates focus, where it becomes a filter. And I'm going to lean into this quite a bit. You need a filter that travels with you everywhere, that's omnipresent everywhere you go. Because you don't get rid of a habit, you don't get rid of behaviors, you don't get rid of conditions, you replace them. In order to say yes to something, you have to say no to something else, right? And that's what this part is all about. For me, once again, personally, I'm going to be transparent. One of my themes for 2026, if not the theme, is leaders building leaders. In order for me to accomplish my 10-year vision, in order for me to accomplish my 3-year milestones, in order for me to accomplish my 1-year goals, right? Specific things I want to accomplish, I know doing it by myself isn't going to work. I can't do it alone. So there's certain skills, there's certain experiences, there's certain talents, there's certain knowledge I need to inculcate. I need to become a person that can attract individuals who get it, the vision, who want to be accountable to it, and have the skills to pay the bills, to execute, right? What is the thing for you that will challenge you to become the person you need to become to achieve things you want to achieve, right? What's going to inform your beliefs, what you say about yourself to yourself, because that's the most important story that you'll ever hear in life, right? Because my year, once again, requires these things. I'm thinking about this all the time, right? These things that I'm sharing with you, they're omnipotent. Everywhere I look, that's my theme. It shows up in my appointment book. It shows up in my phone. I have reminders. It shows up in many of the groups that I participate in online and offline, right? So here's the question. What would your title for this year be if you were really serious about winning, if you've really drawn a line in the sand? And once again, your title can be your title. A framework that I shared specifically was the 10-3-1-90 framework. What is that? Well, number one, you need to have vision. You need to have a story. You need to have a narrative that you tell yourself about yourself, right? It's hard to create a vision that's super specific. So you get a little bit of forgiveness here if it's not specific, right? Because you can't anticipate death, disability, divorce, marriage, oftentimes. How many children you're going to have. People who disappoint, betray you. But you can have a vision. You have an understanding of where you're headed, right? Because the winds of disappointment and hardship and conflict blow on us all the same. But it's the setting of the sail, the direction that you're going that sets the successful from the unsuccessful, right? That's what creates separation. That BS.com can blow on you. And because your vision is so compelling, you see yourself in such a light that it doesn't matter what transpires, right? The gravitational pull of your vision makes sure you're always moving in the right direction. A good way to define a vision for yourself is to ask yourself, look, at 80 years old, what will you regret not attempting, right? What would you hate to look back on and realize you never pursued? What does that life look like, right? It helps establish direction because once again, this is going to become part of your filter. It's going to help you say no to certain things and yes to others, right? I want you to think about another thing, a 3-year set of milestones, right? And what are milestones? Milestones are markers on your entrepreneur road or on your career road. If you're not an entrepreneur full time yet and you're listening to this, right? You want to think about landmarks. I know when I'm driving somewhere, whether it's somewhere that I know like the back of my hand or somewhere I haven't been for a while, one of the first things I look for is milestones. The gas station, the restaurant, the bowling alley, the house that I lived in or a friend lived in. Or, you go somewhere, you're traveling, and it's the same home with those holiday, Christmas, Thanksgiving balloons, the big people blown up, and you chuckle at it, or you're like, that's really annoying, right? What are the 3-year milestones that will let you know you're on track, right? And you need to get kind of specific with this. It might be revenues earned. It might be the size of your company. It might be you acquired a building. It might be you're leasing a building. It might be a certain number of homes you want to acquire as a real estate investor, right? It might be, I mean, crystal clear signs that I've made it. Maybe it's a TED talk. Maybe your goal is to speak at your company's convention 3 years from now. What are the milestones that for certain, when you look at them, you say, you know what, I'm on the right path. I'm heading the right direction. I'm in the process of becoming the person I wanted to become. You should write those things down. And once again, you're going to hear me say this over and over again. It shouldn't be 20 or 30 things. It should be like 1 to 3, maybe 5 things at the most. What are those milestones for you? Also, you need to have a 1 year kind of, not necessarily a vision, but defined outcomes for the year. This is where you do get specific, right? Because if it's not specific, you can't hold yourself accountable. And more importantly, you can't create a filter. You can't find mentors, accountability partners, or people who are able to help you along the way or help you stay within those guardrails because they know specifically what you're trying to. You got to get specific with this. It could be the number of clients that you want to take on. It could be the amount of revenues that you want to, once again, generate in your business. It could be KPIs, key performance indicators, right? To let you know whether or not you're on the right track mentally, from a health standpoint, from a psychological, spiritual standpoint, right? And for the purpose of this discussion, from an entrepreneur standpoint, right? What are the metrics that you're going to track to make sure that by the end of the year, if you hit these metrics, you will achieve your goals, right? This is going to become your board of directors, right? You're going to answer to a board of directors as opposed to your feelings or what is popular at the time or what's sexy at the time or what's interesting at the time. You may have a goal in terms of the number of partnerships you need to take on or fundraising numbers. These aren't vibes, these are targets, right? I know one of my 3 year, kind of like 5 year milestones is to create a situation where my B2B organization or the B2B organization I participate in, we be more specific, right? Because no one is owned by me. It's just people I serve and that people believe in the vision. In any respect, is to help over 100,000 households over the next 10 years get on the right side of the fence and start successful businesses that employ people. And we know that not everybody can be successful full-time as an entrepreneur. We don't need everybody. We just need more, right? Because it's the employers that determine the food you eat. They're transparent because they determine what grocery stores are in your neighborhood. They determine whether or not the grass gets cut. They determine whether or not a liquor store or whether a rec center is at the end of your block. We want to see more people having that type of agency in their lives and in their communities, right? And I can break that down by year. How many people need to be onboarded and successfully move in that direction? I can break that down. How many people need to be onboarded in the next 3 years, 5 years? You get the point. You need to do that for yourself, right? Set specific targets. The next thing that I'm going to encourage you to do, and I encourage people in the room to do, is to create 90-day rocks or 90-day sprints, right? Your big rocks, right? And here's the thing, once again, you don't want to write down 20, 30 items, but break it down to, once again, 3 to 5. Now, once again, why is this important? Because number one, a confused mind does nothing. Number two, if you write down 30 items and you achieve 3, you're going to feel some kind of way about yourself. You're going to feel like you haven't made progress. You're going to feel like you haven't made success. To be real, that's how it works, right? If you write down 5 items and you achieve 3 out of 5, even though you were not perfect, you still feel like you made progress, right? Snowflakes turn into snowballs. You have wins to celebrate along the way. And you don't get mired in the sense that you're feeling some kind of way about something like you're failing. It's really important. Also, if you are a leader, right, you lead others, you impact others, you influence others, you're building a team. You can't, it's difficult to get 10, 20, 30, 50, 100, 300 plus people to focus on 20 different things, right? You want to operate more like a laser as opposed to a light bulb when it comes to this. And that's another reason why it's important. Because I'll tell you something that we've all heard as entrepreneurs at some point in time in our entrepreneur journey. is that people underestimate what you can get done long term and overestimate what you can get done in the short term. You don't want to do that to yourself. So pick that 3 to 5 rocks. Pick that 3 to 5 like specific goals you can be accountable to. Not some pie in the sky. I just want to earn more money. I want to have more friends. I want to have more clients. I want to have a certain house. I want to have a certain. No, be specific, right, about these things. Because momentum compounds, right? Belief compounds, confidence compounds when you do it this way, when you give yourself an opportunity to get some periodic wins. So the other thing, which I kind of mentioned repeatedly over and over again, why this is so important, because some individuals in the workshop are like, why is it important for me to write all these things down? Why you encourage me to write these things down? Because this is what I know. Bad news travels faster than good, and BS.com does too. And every day that you wake up, life is lifing. It's waiting for you. It's said that human beings have approximately 60 to 80,000 thoughts per day, and that 80% of them are negative. You need to write these things down so you can make them omnipresent. Because BS.com is waiting for you everywhere. Just because you chose entrepreneurship, that does not mean disappointment, delays, betrayal, hardship, random problems. Life is not going to stop lifing. And you got to have something available to keep you on track. I want you to think about it like this. They say that a rocket, when it takes off and it's heading into outer space, that it is off course the super majority of the time. But it is communicating with the station or stations around it to put it back on track again, right? It lets the astronauts, or in this case, the technology, know that, hey, you need to make an adjustment here. Where, guess what? That's what this is all about. You having guardrails to make the necessary adjustments when the BS.com happens, when the shiny object syndrome happens, when that family member or that friend starts to make requests of you, or to begin to say things or behave in ways that are in alignment with your board of directors, right? Which is your goals, your vision, your big rocks, right? Your milestones. So you need things available to you where you can touch them multiple times a day, because you're going to have negative thoughts. You're going to have pain. You're going to have discomfort. You're going to have inconvenience. You need these things in place to remind you why it is that you're paying its price. You need to have screensavers on your phone or on your iPad or on your tablet. You need to have it in your appointment book. I know I certainly have these things. In my appointment book, my goals are already readily available to me. I receive a nasty phone call, a bad situation, a deal goes south, someone betrayed me, disappointed me. Maybe I didn't perform up to expectations, right? When I'm having a moment where I'm getting ready to get distracted or my belief starts to waver, I pull these goals out. I pull out the vision. I remind myself of what it is that I'm doing. Maybe you have it on a whiteboard like I do behind me now, right? Maybe you have it in your notes. Maybe you have reminders, email reminders, or even calendar reminders. So your goals become omnipresent. So they become more present in your mind than a BS.com that's swirling around you, right? The bottom line is what typically separates people, once again, as you have successful people who have their sails set. They know the winds, the tempest, the drama blows on us all the same. No one is immune to that stuff. But if you have your sails set in the right direction, when those winds blow, you're still moving in the right direction. Versus other individuals, they're blowing in the wind like a leaf, right? There's no foundation. There's nothing to keep them accountable. There's no guardrails. Your mind needs repeated exposure to the narrative that you choose, right? They say spaced repetition is the mother of all learning. Belief, you respond to your beliefs. That's why if you try to adopt new habits, that's why if you try to adopt new behaviors, that's why if you decide you want to do things differently, you end up falling back into bad habits, bad behaviors, bad this, bad that, because you don't believe yourself enough. When you don't show up the way you're supposed to show up, when you don't keep your promises, when you don't execute, you can look, the first people to hear the lie, the first person to hear a lie is yourself. That's why this is important, because you have to repeat this narrative to yourself. You have to constantly have the reminders that you are who you say you are, right? You have to say it enough so you begin to believe it. That's the way the mind works. And if you don't, life will write a narrative for you, right? So how do you install these systems? I'm one, having a scoreboard. Something else I recommended is IDS meetings, and I'm gonna get into what that acronym means in terms of identifying, discussing, and solving. But goals about systems are wishes. So we've talked about systems, but you need a daily scoreboard. You need KPIs, and you should take the time to define all these different things. I know what some of you are thinking listening to this. I know what the individuals were thinking in the room before they left the room. Why do I need to? I don't have time. Well, you make time to drive 30, 40 minutes or commute somewhere. You spend days and weeks and months planning for a trip somewhere. You spend days planning your next trip to the restaurant with your buddies, your pals, or to that vacation or trip so you can take pictures and post it on Instagram. Why wouldn't you give your goals? Why wouldn't you give your vision? If this is really important, you made up your mind, you want to make a change, you got to make an investment in it. So yes, you need to write these things down. Because once again, these things become your guardrails. They become your system. It reminds you of your motivation. It makes sure that you're on track. So for me, my KPIs in terms of my business are very simple. Simple question I ask across all verticals I'm involved with, right? The first is, how many times have people learned about what I do? And I'm not myopic about this. It can be social media. I do most of my damage on LinkedIn. It can be people learning and being introduced to my ecosystem via Substack. It can be I meet someone at a coffee shop. It can be I'm giving a presentation and there are multiple people in the room who are learning about what it is I do for the first time. It can be a networking event. It doesn't matter. I purposely track how many times new people are learning about my business. I track how many times people have an opportunity to make an educated decision. In other words, they hear a presentation. It can be a video. I can be giving a presentation via Zoom from one person in front of 30 people. It can be via, YouTube, right? Where people actually get a full-on presentation about what it is. They get the value prop in total, right? That's what I track. That way people have a chance to say yes or no, but at least it's educated, right? Third-party validation. Yeah, I track that. How many times I'm able to enlist partners, how many times I'm able to enlist clients, how many times I'm able to enlist people whom I've made a demonstrable impact in their life. Because third party is the best party. Of course, I'm not going to say bad things about what it is I do. But if I can line up clients, if I can line up the receipts and individuals who will speak favorably of me, that creates more credibility than anything else you can do, especially nowadays with all the craziness going on via social media. I track those things. I track the number of referrals. For me, this is huge. This is the number one KPI that I track because people do business with folks whom they like, know, and trust. But you know what? They refer people to whom they like, know, and trust. And if I'm getting referrals, that means my approach is right. That means people have a good feeling about me. That means that even if a person doesn't necessarily know exactly what it is I do, they like me enough where I can revisit that conversation and they'll tell other people about me, right? So that's kind of like my weekly, daily rhythm. These are the things that I track. What are you tracking to make sure that you're doing the things you need to do on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis to achieve your goals, right? Because if you're not tracking it, you can't measure it. And if you can't measure it, you can't ascertain the effectiveness of what you're doing. And then if you can't do that, you can't train other people and give them a track to run on. This is huge, right? You have to be able to do these things for yourself and also the organization that you're going to build, the business that you're going to build. So you give people a track to run on, right? You need IDS meetings, weekly meetings with yourself or with your team. The purpose of the IDS meetings is to identify a handful of items, things where you dropped the ball, areas where you were going to deliver a product or service and it just didn't get there. It didn't meet expectations. Maybe you gave a sales presentation or approach fell flat. You want to identify those things. You want to discuss those things and you want to pose solutions, right? You want to do that for yourself on a weekly basis. And once again, this is part of your cadence. This is part of your guardrails. This is part of making sure that you are achieving the things you need to achieve and you're on pace, right? You're on goal, you're on task. Because problems that don't get solved become patterns, and patterns become your life, right? So I kind of talked about this repeatedly because it's so absolutely important, and I just got to drill it in again, right? Your environment and your behaviors determine your outcomes, determines whether or not you're going to achieve your goals. And look, you don't replace behaviors. So, I mean, you don't get rid of behaviors. You don't get rid of beliefs. You don't get rid of actions. You replace them, right? And it's going to be the same thing in terms of the people who are around you. You got to protect the space between your ears and behind your eyeballs. This is huge. That means protecting yourself from negative conversations or negativity in general. That means making sure you're not being recruited in the dumb conversations that don't serve you, right? It means avoiding time vampires, individuals who, hold on one moment. So once again, you want to protect yourself from negativity. You want to protect yourself from dumb conversations. You can't let people recruit you into conversations that don't serve you. Right? I've heard it said best like this: don't get into an argument with a loser because they'll beat you at experience every single time. Time vampires, right? Because once again, you got to be willing to say no to certain things, to say yes to other things. People are going to want to suck up your time in activities. You may have to give up bowling. You may have to give up Netflix. You may have to give up the cigar bar for a while, right? You may have to give up certain things that don't serve your goals, right? Pointless arguments or people who don't respect what it is that you're building. The rent behind my eyeballs and ears is very expensive. If you're not contributing positivity, if you're not edifying, if you're not pouring into me, criticism, cool, as long as it's constructive. But if you're not speaking well of me in rooms when I'm not in those spaces, right? You can't occupy space behind my eyes and between my ears. You're not. It's not that I'm encouraging people to diss people. Sometimes you have to distance yourself from people. You need to be around people who want to see you win. You need to be around people who speak well of you when you're, once again, when you're not in the room. People who bring solutions as opposed to problems and naysayers. People who support your growth. People who challenge you constructively. These things are important, right? And once again, just like there's some things you have to give up in order to go up or to grow up, it's the same thing with people, right? Because once again, you don't stop habits, you replace them. It's the same thing with people. Sometimes you just simply have to replace people who are actually in alignment with your vision, or at the very least, pursuing the same things that you want, right? So that's part of the guardrails. That's what I share with the group. That's what served me time and time again, right? Because you're saying no to the distractions. You're saying no to the wrong partnerships. You're saying no to the business of the month syndrome, right? The shiny object syndrome, scrolling for hours online, entertainment that steals your energy, commitments that just simply don't align. Because when you're having success, you become more attractive and people are going to approach you, right? It's just like a plane taking flight, especially in the beginning, right? All the turbulence transpires in the beginning. And you just have to understand that and get comfortable with that, right? You have to be willing to block aside. You have to be willing to set aside time, or what I would say time blocks. Set aside time to do your outreach. Set aside time for presentations. Set aside time for follow-ups, for planning. Set aside time for family, for recovering. The hustle is a muscle. The brain works just like your muscles do in your body, right? And you need to set aside time to think, even if it's for 15 minutes, a 30-minute nap. I mean, going to the gym, going for a walk, listening to something that's entertaining or edifying, even if just for a couple moments. Yeah, you got to give yourself a break. You got to block these things aside, or else the small pebbles, the distractions, the BS.com will suck up all the space in your life. Look, you can't manage time. Time don't care. Time's not interested in arm wrestling with you. You can't bribe time. You can't take time out on a date. You can't ask, which you can't do nothing with time. But what you can do is prioritize. You can put your priorities in your calendar and dedicate an hour, 30 minutes, 2 hours, whatever you need to dedicate to make sure that you are building a life of satisfaction, right? Because if you don't do it, once again, the BS.com, the little rocks will take up your whole day, right? Life has an agenda for you when you wake up, and you might not be happy with what's in store for you if you don't put those big rocks in first, because your mind can only be occupied with so much. right? People ask me all the time, how do you stay so focused? How do you stay so savage? How do you stay so locked in? Is because I'm constantly thinking about the big rocks. I'm constantly negotiating and saying, look, the little rocks, I got to put you to the side. I got to put these big rocks in first, right? Whether it's per day, per week, per month, per year, whatever the case may be. You may need to use AI, right? I've programmed the AIs that I use to make sure that if I introduce an ideal, if I introduce a project, if I introduce anything that's not in alignment with the goals and the milestones and the big rocks and the 5 year and the 10-year vision, all these different things, my AI knows to say no. It knows literally to say no. It'll literally ignore, or it will just say, look, this is in alignment with your 10-year direction. It's not it's not in alignment with your 1-year outcome. It's not in alignment with your 3-year milestones. It's not in alignment with your 90-day rocks, right? No. And that's not being rigid. That's protecting, right? That's protecting. Now, look, why did I feel so compelled to conduct this workshop? And why am I so compelled to share this information besides the fact that I just like to see people win? Well, look, once again, as I shared before, this is what has saved my life repeatedly and is what saved my life a couple of years ago. As I shared before, I was going through a divorce. So this isn't like theory for me. This is real. This is what I applied to get to where I'm at today. I use this framework, right? So it was a situation where I knew following my divorce, there was going to be a Herculean effort to keep me out of my children's life. It is what it is, right? Because oftentimes when you're a man and a marriage or relationship ends, the other party is dead set on creating a narrative about you that justifies their behavior or the decisions that they've made, right? So they can paint you and create a narrative that you are a deadbeat, that you're a loser, that you're this, that, and the other, right? The ideal of seeing you win is insufferable because oftentimes when you're dealing with situations like that, the person that you're divorcing, they have to feel like they're in the right, right? Look, people will feel like the ideal of being wrong is just unfathomable. It can't be tolerated, right? Accountability goes out the door. I knew that's what I was going to be dealing with. I knew I had 60 days to get my life together. I was not homeless per speak, but I was in an Airbnb, dire straits. I gave up the vehicle, didn't want to fight over. All I wanted was my children. Literally, I was walking around with the clothes on my back. And because of that, I had to earn a certain dollar amount on a day-to-day basis, or I was going to be on the street. I had to earn a certain amount on a week-to-week basis, or else I was going to be on the street. I had to earn a certain amount on a month-to-month basis, or else I was going to be on the street. And that wasn't it, right? Court appearances, dealing with attorneys, people saying things about me, people whom I trusted, whom I thought were friends, that were supportive of me, who basically just wanted to kick dirt on me when they saw that I finally failed, right? People want to paint me a certain type of way because it served them. And so the only way I was able to combat that, the only way I was able to stay upright, not get distracted, not to fall victim to these circumstances was number one, to once again make my goals omnipresent. So it didn't matter what conversation I have with the attorneys. It didn't matter at a pickup or drop off. I'm dealing with all kinds of negativity and BS.com and people making it extremely difficult, putting obstacles in place for me to be able to father my children and to be able to show up that I wanted. It didn't matter because regardless of what transpired, I was constantly looking at my goals. I was constantly reading to myself and talking to myself about the vision that I have for myself, right? And it was, once again, I kept these things omnipresent. I was going to determine the story. I wasn't going to someone dictate my story to me, right? This was huge for me because it kept me, once again, focused on the things I needed to focus on, right? I tracked my KPIs religiously. I woke up on a day-to-day basis, and I had a certain number of people I had to reach out to on LinkedIn. I had a certain number of people whose doors I had to knock on. I had a certain number of phone calls that I had to make, a certain number of emails that I had to go out. Look, I was at a point where doing just enough was not going to be enough. Like my back was against the wall. I had to do so much where it was impossible for me to fail. And so I tracked my KPIs savagely, right? Because I couldn't afford to fail. My goals required this of me. And because I was constantly reminded of my goals, I began to believe in what I was doing because of small wins along the way. People hung up on me. Once again, I didn't have the clothing, the suits, and everything else that I have today. I was showing up, and I wasn't showing up as my best self. I wasn't looking credible all the time. And so, yeah, I got doors shoved, slammed in my face. People who wouldn't listen to me. Keep in mind, I'm door knocking, so I don't have transportation initially, right? This is where I was at. Instead of focus on woe is me and focus on my emotions, my goals became my board of directors. My goals became who I answered to in the morning and at the end of the day, right? I was guarding the gates, and not taking action was non-negotiable, right? Not entertaining negativity was non-negotiable. Not sitting in the pain was not arguing with people who weren't building anything and wasn't going through what I was going through, who didn't have my solutions. Like, it wasn't going to happen, right? I was guarding the gates ruthlessly. I wouldn't listen to you if you were not edifying, or you were not giving me ideals or opening up doors or giving me referrals, right? And it was the structure that saved me. It was the structure that kept me focused. It was the structure that made sure that I did the things I needed to do in order to get to the point where I can come home to a family, loved ones who love and respect me, earn revenue and income that, quite frankly, to be able to build a business that pays me more than what 80% of people are earning working 40, 60 hours a week, right? To have the type of relationships I have today. It was this structure that created that for me, right? And day by day, I became more financially stable. Day by day, I became more confident because I was winning, right? I was meeting my KPIs. I was kind of meeting my goals. I was meeting these milestones. I was checking off these big rocks, right? And it focused me even more. It fed the savagery. It fed the focus that I needed in order to achieve what I needed to achieve. And once again, I had accountability partners. I had mentors. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that. Nothing drives me, nothing annoys me more than finding out someone's had success and not being willing to give people their flowers who supported them. Like, it's just so absolutely ridiculous, right? Anyway, so I have people like that who are around me, helping me build. And that's why I teach like this. This is why I coach like this. This is why I felt compelled to share this. Because I know there are individuals who may not be dealing with the specific circumstances I'm dealing with, but maybe dealing with maybe dealing with certain conditions. They're very similar. I also know there are individuals who desperately want to succeed, who desperately want to win, but no one has sat down and said, look, this is not only, you don't only define what you do, but this is how you go about it, right? And look, I can't give you everything that I gave during the workshop, but hopefully I've given you enough, like some basic architecture to help you achieve your goals and to move further, go farther, go harder, do the things you need to do. So if you're looking to climb out of the hole, once again, I firmly believe motivation may not be the challenge for most of us. Definitely wasn't for me. But you need a system, you need urgency, you need guardrails, you need execution, right? So I'm just going to recap this. Number one, start with some of the hard questions. Build a vision that's actually yours, that you have ownership of. Forget trying to create goals and objectives because you feel like it's going to make other people happy. That's not going to motivate you. That's not going to create the gravitational pull that you need to do the things you need to do when you don't feel like it and when it's not convenient, right? Give yourself a theme or a title, something to help you filter like how you see the world around you. Give yourself a story. Use the 10-3-1-90 framework, right? Direction, milestones, targets, rocks. Make sure that your goals, once again, are omnipresent. Because if you don't, life will rewrite your narrative for you, right? Choose 3 to 5 things over the course of a day, a week, a month, a year, a quarter, a year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Choose 3 to 5 things, right? Kill the confusion. Have clarity, because a confused mind does nothing. Install systems. Have a daily dashboard or a weekly dashboard so you literally track what you're doing. Have IDS meetings with yourself and your team, and guard the gates, man. Guard your mind, guard your time, Guard your relationships. Be savage about this. Be unapologetic. The people who love you, they'll support you. Block the time. Put those big rocks in first so the pebbles don't fill things up. Use tools, even AI, to protect alignment and commit to the daily activity. Because momentum is built, it's not wished for. And that's what you need. You need momentum when you're rock bottom. You need some quick, fast victories, right? You need evidence of progress. And look, if you want the virtual versions workshop, where we can actually build the plan that is in real time, drop a comment with the word execute. Next time we have a live version of this, where we can do a deeper dive or we have a seminar, make sure we get that information to you. And if you're an entrepreneur who feels like you need a change right now, right, you're urgent, you're ready to take action, you're ready for structure, you're ready to build that momentum, you are exactly who this framework was meant for. You're exactly why I shared this testimony. You're exactly why I conduct this workshop. So let's build taller buildings together, celebrate success in advance. Goodbye for now.